Folks, welcome to today's 1 o'clock meeting. We've all been anxiously waiting for this one. It is the presentation of the 2021 budget. Before we start, number one is we're passing around a sign-in sheet, so you have to put in your name, phone number, and particulars. I have to do the initial COVID-19 screening tool for in-person meeting. If anybody meets one of these criteria, we would ask you to leave the room, go home, seek medical attention, however you want to do it. But anyway,
Except you.
okay, except you, yeah, you have to stay. Anyone have a fever of 100 degrees, 0.4 Fahrenheit or higher within the last 14 days? Cough, shortness of breath, pneumonia, flu, or similar symptoms? Traveled out of Arkansas for the last 14 days? Had guests or family in the village from other states where sheltering in place orders have been recommended, required within the last 14 days? Or had contact with anyone who has lab confirmed novel coronavirus or is currently in testing? Since no one has jumped up and left the room, I guess we call this meeting to order, and it looks like Mr. King is going to kick us off. With that, please take it away.
Thank you, Tom. We're thrilled to be here. As you can tell, the excitement in the room. I want to start out briefly, real quick, before we jump into numbers, and just thank the team. This has been an especially trying procedure for these guys because it was all new. It was kind of a change, confusing to say the least on some things. So it was tough. And I want to thank you guys for putting on the hard work up till the last minute. Especially a big thank you for Karina. What she's done and what she's prepared has been nothing short of miraculous, how she's thrown all this together. On top of her other duties, on top of trying to work on clothes right now. This is a bad time. She texted me last night, I believe 9 o'clock, and finally tell her to go home, you know. But what we got here is, you know, we're going to present what we want to present to the board. And what we've done is put together a very conservative yet realistic budget. And I've been doing, just a background on me, I've been doing large operational budgets for a little over 20 years. This is probably one of the smaller ones, yet probably one of the most confusing ones for several different reasons. And I think it's just the way it's been done in the past. So what you'll see here in a minute is a presentation of what we propose going forward to make things a little clearer and to unmuddy the waters and to make it very easy to see what's what and where what goes. But before you put together a big budget like that, before I sit down with the team, it's really important when you encounter these things is to get out and understand each and every department and understand how each department works and how that machine rolls. And you know, we've got so many big components, and what I did the last 2 months, what I'm still doing is reaching out to these departments, such as the sanitation department, spending a full day understanding how our wastewater treatment plant works, understanding the ins and outs and every amazing feature of that. And if you haven't done it, you need to go do it, because it is a major part of our operation. Without that, we're in deep, you know what, for a pond. But, and also spent a whole day with the water department at the water plant. It too is an amazing operation, and it's so many different turns and valves that make that thing operate. And you gotta understand those ticket items and how they operate, who operates them, why we have level 4 technicians at these facilities keep these things going. You know, understanding all of our different 8 golf courses, understanding how they all operate. You know, what makes them turn? Where are we missing? How's the equipment? You know, meeting with all the superintendents, meeting with the golf department, understanding how all that rolls in, meeting with the food and beverage department, understanding how all of our operations work, even the operations we lease out. until you understand all that, until you breathe it and live it, you can't really look at one of these, because you don't understand, it's just numbers. So taking that and understanding and sitting down with these guys like we did for the last 5 or 6 days nonstop, and going through line by line, I think we put together a really good product. I think it's a really good product for the future. And that's what we're looking at. We're looking at how can we set the village up for future to be successful, to fund our capital projects, to fund our golf courses, to repair our buildings, keep our infrastructure all moving ahead in a sustainable way. And I think you'll see when we go through these numbers from a high level, you'll understand where we're at and why we're thinking the way we're thinking. So with that, let's jump in, Karina. And I'll probably, Tom, if you don't mind, I'm gonna probably come up and point. It'll be a little easier. And Karina will drive a little bit, just so you understand what we're looking at. I don't have my laser pointer, so I apologize. Basically, on your first page, we come down.
I'm trying to make it bigger.
For about 7 days, we've been doing this little game by point to go a different direction. Basically, we're starting from the top, and this is the way our consolidated looks. Revenue's coming in at 35,685. You look at 2020 budget, 35,621. You look at 2019 was at 34,339. You have to bring up 2019 to understand how things are going. You have to bring up 2718. I looked at all 3 years to understand a little history of where we're at and why, and understand 2019. What happened in 2019 to dictate those numbers? You know, so you have to understand a little history to understand a budget like this. You can't completely go zero and zero it out, or you're going to be so lost in the weeds, it's not going to work. So we did use a little history, and it's a little history so you can see where we're at. So the overall compensation, 17,859 compared to the budget last year, 17,620. 2019, 15,951. You have to understand one of our big increases, I've got my notes over there, was our minimum wage went up close to $400,000 on a total roll as far as bringing minimum wage up and also bringing a section of folks around that minimum wage up. So that's a rollover of $400,000 in just compensation, but we also, top line to date, are saving about $430,000. So it's almost a little bit of a wash from top line, and I say top line salary, some positions we've removed and some other positions. Any questions? You good? No? Okay. So you come down to an operating expenses, 12,449. Last year we were at 12,642. 2019 actuals were 13,961. So operations actually went down. And that's the tricky part, going through each one of these operations and not taking away too much. Because what's going to happen if you take away too much, our product's going to suffer. But I think the team went through and did a really good job of taking out what we could take out and being responsible of what we can go forward. And then you come down, what she has in here is this forgiveness loan that's in there, and it's still in there. It's liquid cash that's in there, so we have to account for it in here. The tricky part where it gets a little confusing is we got this rollover utility fund. And what that comes from, Karina, that comes from right here. These two, correct?
Yes.
308 and 345 that were approved as rollover from previous years. And the interesting part, I don't know how familiar you are, I'm going to explain it. The interesting part of what this is, it's real cash that comes out of the utilities fund. And it gets approved as rollover what they didn't spend or rollover the year. Well, what it happens is it goes into our main line item, which is that's where we disagree with what we're doing, because basically we're mixing money. So if you go back to this 923 on the other page, that's our prior year rollover, which is right here. We have to account for it because it is cash, it is in there. If you don't put it here, when you go down to the bottom, you're going to have a deficit. Pretty simple, right? So you come down here, your prior year's capital funds, this is general, this is the 642, 324, and that is, does it have another page, Karina? That is right here. This is contingent on the 2020 forecast. What we're saying we're not, and correct me if I go off, what we're not gonna spend this year in capital savings. So if you take this,
That is our net excess,
At the
regardless
bottom.
of capital, that's our net excess year-end income without the utilities. So the two of them, you have utilities right here, the 923, which if I come back over here, which was your 308, 345 from prior, along with what we expect to come in for the current year of 20. So, you come back over here, 642 is non-utility year-end earnings. The 923 is the rollover from the prior 2 years plus current, which comes up here.
exactly. It's a little confusing. So that comes into prior year's capital here. The 250,000, this was a 500,000 that was approved for the
Culvert
culvert
project,
repair. We spent 250,000, there's still 250,000 in here. So this is real money, the 250,000, so you have to account for it. And this is where you'll see down at the bottom what we'd like to do to clear this up and get this off the main sheet. Because what you do is you have a lot of money in here that's from utilities and sitting in our main kitty, that it's there, but it's really being used for everything, which it shouldn't be. And you'll see down here at the bottom. This is capital that we plan, that has been budgeted for this year, which is 390. This was last year's budget. This is what we spent, or what we're projected to spend this year, which is the 3086. The 3961 is in the operation, and that's where it gets a little confusing, because what we'd like to do moving forward is move this out of operations and move it into its own capital fund, where this money can be separated, tracked, used, and there is no rollover, because you have a separate account for it. Right now, what's confusing is if you take all the rollover out, which has already been allocated for something else, we've got a deficit at the bottom. So we're kind of clouding the water a little bit, which we don't want to do that. You'll see down here a little bit. This is, help me out, Karina, the projected beginning utility capital reserve.
yeah, so this here, the 15.9, is taking what we've already got, the capital reserves, plus what is scheduled to be put in. This is our projected year-end balance.
So that's the 399 was the payment
Yes,
that go back into the loan. So there's two of those. I don't, you guys know the two accounts that we have to pay back. Can you flip that sheet up?
this one,
Yes. These are the reserve accounts. These are the payments that go back to get these numbers. I guess this was voted on, a target number that it needed to get to. And so each of these have a target number. This one will be met in 2021, correct?
yes.
This one will be met actually in 2021 too. Did we do that or keep that in?
We actually went ahead and are fulfilling that with the 1 million.
Yes.
So there's no payment next year.
You'll see, yes, you'll see next year, and this year, plan our savings, we're gonna cap that off and be done with that one too, which will help in future years too. So back to the other page. So this is the combined, this will be in that one account, which is the utility capital reserve, 1.996. The non-utility reserve, which is at 1933. This addition is from,
So that is up here. That's gonna be our savings at the end that we're
Oh, okay.
expecting to
Yeah.
put in.
I got confused there. This is what I call the general fund. I call this the general savings account, the emergency. And this is the one we really want to work on to really build that up. I believe in the past, this is the one that had the 7 million in it, and we used it for the wastewater plant instead of, so we're trying to build that back up to a big number here. And that's kind of in our plan too. With the leftover, the 417, this brings this account up to the 2350, 751. This is the Gulf Reserve. I guess it's dubbed the Balboa Project. This will be the ending balance we're hoping for this year. With the addition of the end of the 2021 budget, we'll get that to 935, 458. So we're generally growing that, and that is with the 25,000 taken out already that we allotted for Juan to do the car pass. Now, Corinne, you want to talk about those two?
So those are our Cetera investments and our line of credit that we have out there. We have never drawn on our line of credit. They are just there to back some of our other investment securities. So that's remaining the same as it was prior.
And this kind of explains those utility reserves. It's Chapter 1, Article 10, reserve funds for the 5-year plan to reach optimal reserve levels, the 1.99 to 2.388, and the operating reserve of 2.452. So we go down, and this is the unrestricted capital reserve. So this is not the earmarked capital reserve, it's just the capital reserve. The 642, that comes from,
That is our 2020 projected net income earnings that we will roll over to start setting aside for capital.
so if the year goes as planned, the 642 will be our ending number, hopefully maybe a little more, depending on the end of the year. So that's gonna fluctuate, that'll go into 242. The general capital fund is coming from the PP, is that correct? This is coming from the loan, the 3 million up top. If we do this, and we're proposing this, if we do this the way we should do it in our minds, is to make it clear, if we put that 2.1 in here into a general capital fund, now these are separate accounts that don't mesh with your general account. They're separate accounts that can be tracked, you can look at what's earmarked, you can look at exactly, so you have no rollover at the end of the year, you don't spend $1 million, you still got $1 million there. It's not washed in. So if we put that in there, we'll have a grand total of 2.761. And then this down here is the non-utility capital fund, and that's the 1876, that's the rest of the PPE, right?
I need to change my verbiage on that. That's
Yeah,
actually going to be what is left over in utilities from their 923.
That's his fund, that's
plus
correct.
current year net income for 21, which gives us a projection of the 1.8 to be able to set aside.
So that's his utility fund that's commingled, and it should be completely separated out. That'll be his balance, I say his, that'll be the utilities balance of 1.879 at the end of the year. And that's all contingent on how we end and how much we save in there. Now, did we put, Corinne, did I mess on that? Did we take a certain amount of funds and put it to the general, or was that 642?
So the way we did it here, we've got the 3 million coming in from the PPP loan that will be forgiven. We've got, let me go to this sheet. This is a little easier. This is the one you find a little easier to work on. So 2,089,000 is of the 3 million will go into a general. We are going to designate, the difference was going into the non-utility reserve. We are gonna add to that as well, which we did not last year, I believe.
Yeah, we didn't put anything to that.
It was 58 last year, I apologize.
So the reason we propose this right here, these capital funds and capital funds, we'd like to use them as capital fund operating account, which is a separate account, which is what we use, what I've always used in fact, is either an AFE, an approved financial expenditure, or an ACE, which is approved capital expenditure. Now at the beginning of the year, the only way you can truly do that is you have to have a clean break and start fresh. But to do that, you have to have several $1 million to start these accounts. So the only way, we'd be chasing our tails if we kept going like we're going. Every year we take the 642 and we put it over and try to build up. By this way, pulling it out of operations and bringing it down here and putting it in two separate accounts, we can come at the end of the year with all of our capital requests, break them down, prioritize them, come in front of the board and say, hey, this is what we're looking at. This is where we'd like to spend it. We've got 3 million in there. We'd like to spend probably 2 million, keep $1 million in there. You know, what do we think? And we can prioritize it that way. What we're doing now is we're putting all of our capital, which is our total, can you go down or up? Our capital spend this year is, where's that number, Karina?
I broke it down. It is these two
These
right
two.
here.
So you're looking at 3.9, almost 4 million right here in capital spend. This is all up into operations. So the way I look at it is we're approving this capital spend, and we're starting to spend money on capital, all dependent on if our budget comes into place. If we have another COVID, or we have a golf incident, where golf, the monsoons, we've spent capital that we haven't made. So the safest way and the most responsible way is at the end of the year, and we're very fortunate by having this and being able to start that. Because we can start off next year with, if the budget goes the way it will, which this budget, in my mind, can only get better. Because we're very conservative on several levels. I think it can be a lot better. And I think if we mind our P's and Q's like we should, we'll produce a very good number at the end. But we can start that number with these new accounts with, what is it, 2.1 million in a general capital fund. So we can look at that next year, however better we do, the more goes to it. So we can look at that next year and say, without going into operations, we got $2 million we can spend on capital. And that has nothing to do with the utility side, which is always a big chunk. It's always a big piece that we have to keep that building, we have to keep that going. So we can take this $2 million and prioritize and actually be able to give some money to the golf to start getting our equipment back up. Give some money to some different departments and really finalize it out. But also, you're gonna come every year and you're gonna keep adding to these and keep building these. But not only this, we'll be able to build every year. You take a certain percentage of your capital. You don't spend it all. You take a certain percentage of that gain and you put it over in that general fund, which I call the super emergency fund in case the poop hits the fan and we need some money. And that fund should ideally be, I think there's a formula, X amount of times of what you're operating. I mean, it needs to be a big number. I think we get that back up around $7, $8, $9, $10 million. It's a step process. The way we look at the budget, we want to come in this year, kind of come in flat, kind of come in safe, conservative. Let's get to the year. Let's prove that we can do this. And then next year we start getting a more steady plan. But we're already coming in with, a healthy reserve. And then not only a healthy, I call it the general account. So that's kind of the idea. That's the 30,000 foot look at it. What we've done on capital, and we'll go, and the team will go through the department. What we've done on capital is we've really cut out anything that's not pertinent to operations, no extra toys, no anything like that. We've kind of gone straight down. And capital the same as far as other things. We're not looking to do any major projects or improvements. We want to sustain and invest where we need to go, but we also, this year is it's a proving ground. We need to really come in and be solid in what we're doing, and we need to stack our reserves, and we need to start planning for the future. So that's kind of the overall gist of what we're looking at. Any questions on all that? It's very confusing, believe me. It's mind-boggling. Joni, any questions?
No, sir.
Gap. In the past, our accounting has been reported to us as a good audit and so forth. I know we shouldn't be digging too far in the past, but if this is the way to do it, is there a problem with gap? How did we?
No, so this is all in reference to budget and your cash flow. And auditors don't review your budget, they review the past of what's actually happened.
Yeah, but creating the different fund.
All we're doing is trying to segregate them. So because in the past, and if you will look, let me come over to our public utilities, because this is kind of where.
Yeah, and I think I know kind of where you're going here. All we're doing is trying to unmuddy the waters.
Right now, I like that.
Well, and my thought, what me and Craig, I want to be able to present something that's very easy to understand. And I'm telling you, it took me 2 or 3 weeks up until this morning to understand how they did things in the past. Because quite frankly, it was just really very muddy. And the rollovers is where it gets really tricky, because, and she's got a stack of papers approved, a bunch of approved papers, and we finally figured out the trail. Because if you go down, Craig, you get at where it says rollovers, is this it? When you get with all this stuff right here, these rollovers are in the utility world, they're real, they're liquid. It's liquid money. That gets rolled over here into our general account, and it kind of gets mixed up in this, just put it kind of layman's terms, this 923,000 goes into this line, this is real money. It kind of gets starting churned up, and as Karina said this morning, you got all these hands reaching in and pulling apart. And that's just the truth, it does. So in the real world, where I come from, you don't spend it unless you have it.
Yeah.
And this needs to be earmarked out in a separate account, so we know exactly what, we have a true accounting of exactly what we have in there, exactly what cash. Yes, we do have all this, and it is part of the whole POA umbrella, I get that. But it also is earmarked, these utility funds are earmarked for the utility department. This way, if we pull these in, an HOA, PO, a nonprofit, the most important thing is this net line, net excess. You know, you have to, there's two different ways you can do it. The HOAs, we always had an argument, when we had the excess, you had two ways to do it. First way was you dumped it into reserve accounts, well, the second way is you refunded it out to the owners. And that you can't do, it's impossible to do. People finally figured it out. But that's kind of the way these are set up, so your net line, it's the same thing, all we're doing is taking this number and taking it out of a capital number. So we're just clearing, making it clear so you can understand. Before, I don't know if Karina, if you can go back to a previous one that had that capital number. You know what I'm talking about in the budget?
I didn't save it on here.
And that was my big question, because when you came down, you had this big capital number, and it was a huge number. I was like, what is that? Well, that's all the capital. I said, what? No, that should be over here. But no, it's mixed in. So even when you're going down and looking at a P&L, let's say an F&B P&L, if you don't go down and remove any capital in it, you're getting a skewed number. And so I want to look at it true so we can sit and understand, so anybody, laymen can understand exactly what the P&L looks like and exactly actually where we're sitting. Because if you don't understand all this and you don't have somebody sitting and studying and understand, all these numbers kind of just morph in and they just kind of all look the same. We need to pull these out into two separate accounts so our capitals can be tracked and we know exactly, okay, we've got $3 million in capital, general capital. This year, let's go out with a plan, we're spending $2 million. We're gonna keep $1 million back. So we can go through and track it, and it's not getting mixed in, we have this horrible year, and well, we've spent $600,000 of it, we really don't have it in there because it's in the main ledger. And technically in a ledger, it's there until it's spent. Could you find it now? You didn't save it?
No,
Okay.
it's on file, sure.
So I hope that answered kind of where you're going. We just wanted to clear the water a little bit.
It just comes across as one of those obvious things, why.
I know,
Well,
but
you don't-
it was very difficult to figure out where we were in the spending of capital.
Right.
Because it was all rolled in there and everybody said, well, it's in there. And so like he said, they were going, here, I want some of that, I want some of that, and
Well, the aha moment came for me is when I sat down and did Jason's budget, and Jason's like, no, we got X amount of dollars, it's rollover from us, it's excess, it's capital, it's in there. I'm like, no, it's not. He's like, no, it is in there. So we went back, studied, and it is in there. But, you know, how do you, it's commingling your accounts, and we need to clean the water so that we do know a true number of capital. We know exactly where we're at on capital, we know what we're spending, and if there becomes a time where we need to freeze capital, we know we've got $2 million liquid. And that's the word I like to use because I like to see it liquid. We have two accounts that we can break out that has liquid cash in it. Right now, when you do it like this and roll it in, to me, it's not very liquid, it's kind of smoky, and it's kind of there, but it's not there.
Fuzzy.
Because it's very fuzzy, because if you go down to, when you break it down even more, if you go down to the money we depend on as far as operations, which I don't know where we at the page, yeah, the page that's got the breakdown by division.
This is it.
Well, I'm talking about, we have our, okay, can you go up, right here. You know, we've got this money coming in here, but we also account on all this other cash that comes in. And this we know is pretty much coming in. We got a pretty ballpark on that. The other stuff, you know, perfect world it goes through, this is where we can get to. So when you start spending this other stuff, and it starts eating into that capital utility that's been there, you know, it's hard to decide what's what. You know, again, they're all in the same POA, it's all part of the same deal, but it needs to be separated out. So that's what we just proposed. It's easier to look at. I think it'll make it easier to explain. It'll make it easier to you know, okay, where are we on capital spending? Well, it'll probably take her an hour and a half to go in and find out exactly what we spent, where it shouldn't be that way. And even though we've earmarked it, every capital expenditure will come with an ACE, which is approved capital expense. It'll be gone through the process and signed off, so we make you know. So before that money's spent, It'll go to Karina, it'll go to myself, we'll look at that ledger, and we'll, okay, it's still there, it's approved, it's been approved, we'll move it. I said, now it's just a little, so we just wanna clear it up a little, to make it easier to look at, to understand. So at the end of the year, I don't wanna be the one trying to explain about this rollover, well, we got this rollover here, I don't know where it rolled down the road somewhere, I don't know what happened to it, but it's there.
Waste a lot of time.
Well, it just made, it was almost too much common sense for, we kept saying to ourselves, oh, we're missing something. Because this is just, it's, the checkbook at home, you don't spend it unless you have it. And I think our main goal is to build these funds, so we have these reserve funds, don't spend them all, so we can build these reserve funds down here, so we can, one year we can, hey, Juan needs $1 million to fix this. We've got it in there, we're gonna send it over there, that year's his. And what we'll do is we'll get on that OEM, is that what it's called? What I wanna see is a 5-year capital plan that we can put together resort-wide, that we can say, okay, we've got X amount of balance here. We're projecting the next 5 years we'll be at this balance. We can put it all on a spreadsheet. We can accelerate some, we can decelerate some, we can move some out. And we can put those all on the sheet to understand what we need and what needs to be accounted for, what we need to save for. If there's a big Balboa project, we need $1.5 million, we need to save a little and cut some back, so next year we have that money down there. So,
A big difference between the prior way and now is we're not actually doing a whole lot different. So when you ask your audit questions, we're not that they were doing anything wrong in the past. We're, like you said, we're trying to make it a little clearer on how we can follow it and track it. The main thing is, if we do it this way, we are not spending money on capital that we haven't earned yet.
Exactly.
We are designating money to then turn around and spend it, once we know we have it.
and it just doesn't get us in sticky situations that if we have that bad year, we have the COVID year. This right here is an absolute blessing in disguise. And without that, we wouldn't be able to start that. And without this, we would be starting with this, I think it's 642. And okay, we have 642. 642 on a project, that's peanuts. There's not much, that's like, Juan needs all this stuff to fix Balboa. Well, I only got $250,000. What can you do with it? He was wisely, he said, well, let's save it, and let's spend $25,000, which he'll probably come in at about $15,000, but, do what we can to do the best. This way, we've got liquid asset, liquid money over here that we can actually deal with, we can plan with and strategize with. And like she said, we're really not doing anything different, we're just breaking it out. We'll be able to pull this out at the end of the year and it'll be real. Instead of, it's kind of smoke and mirrors.
I think that's an excellent idea. I don't know why it hasn't been done before. Kudos to you guys for coming up with that, as long as it meets GAAP accounting, I'm sure it does.
It all looks good on paper.
And that's good, it looks good on paper, and you're right about the forgiveness of the PPP loan, that is a blessing in disguise, and I know to get that to be forgivable, there had to be a lot of hard work behind that, to justify that, to make that happen too, so that's,
That was, Karina's
good work on that.
And we talked over and over about it, and I'm one of those guys, is it 100%? Are you sure? She says, yes, Michelle, are you sure? But it's a great, it's a great tribute to what we've been able to save this year and what, the bottom line have come to do. It's been pushing off a lot of capital, but I think the team's put together. And then again, as you'll see, we go down. I really think this number next year is gonna be a lot different. I won't be happy with anything around here. I'll be happy with a lot more. But I think there's a lot of variables out there that we can work with. Right now, golf is going excellent. Rounds are going excellent. October rounds are, how much are we up in October already, Tom?
3,500 rounds already.
3,500 rounds already. So we capitalize on that. As you all know, we're trying to redo the whole F&B operation from pretty much ground up, which is no easy challenge. And our goal there is, it's a 2-year goal for me. This year is to cut it in half, next year is to break even, after that we make money. And it could be a lot quicker than that. We've got the right people in here that are gonna, to make this thing happen, but what we have to understand is, food and beverage is probably one of the toughest business you ever try to get into. But it's more than just, it doesn't happen overnight. Like I told Brian the other day, we're 5 minutes into the first quarter. We got a long way to go in the game. We got a lot of great things to keep going. You'll see on the numbers there, I think that, you know, we were extremely conservative. I think one of the goals mentioned was pretend, let's look at COVID still here. So it can only get better. So, and with that, there's no question, I know this is gonna take a lot of time on the roll. Yep.
Yeah, okay. Couple of questions. Can you go back to gross revenues? Okay, so we're projecting 35.685 in the 2021 budget. If you go back to 2020 forecast, that's plus 2 million. Between 2020 forecast and 2019, it drops by about 600,000 or something like that. Anyway, you know, I believe when you say you're trying to make a conservative budget, but when I look at the net revenues, it's plus 2 million. Is there a summary on the source of the increase?
You'll actually see it go down department by department.
Mhm.
You'll actually see where it's coming from. And I think there's a few things, what were the big hitters?
If you come up here, here's where you're gonna see not much change there. Admin is expected to bring in roughly 15 more than the 20 forecast. Our innovation, which is compliance, permitting, inspections, and so forth, is expected to be a little bit higher, not much. Public safety is right around the same. Public works, because of the increase, the 2.7 increase in utilities and so forth, that's where you're gonna have some of these figures come in that make up some of that difference.
Yeah. I'm looking for 2 million.
Yeah.
It all adds up.
It's food and beverage.
Okay, food and beverage is
Food and
pretty
beverage
big.
is a big difference
Mhm.
because of a lot of the stuff that Charles and the rest of the team have in mind to re-innovate.
Which I don't even think that revenue right there, and I think Brian, our new F&B guy, I don't even think we scratched the surface there, just to be honest.
Okay, and that's
you have
even,
to realize, we were closed for 3 months in
Mhm.
2020. So these 2020 projections
okay,
include the fact of we were closed, and it's, if we operate the rest of the year, kind of like how we're doing right at the moment, so it's gonna come in less. I mean, we took a hit.
so if you compare it to 2019, it's not that dramatic, but at the same time, we may or may not suffer from a COVID overhang.
I think that's the misnomer, that we really, the unknown. You know, it's hard for me to look at a complete budget out there, especially in the food and beverage side and some other sides, and not kind of budget realistically. You know, 3 months out, it hurt a lot. You know, if I'm looking right here at recreation, I think recreation revenue, we still, when we get creative this year, I think that, what bothers me about this is the gap between it, if you're looking at that 924 to that 2.7. That really bothers me, and we're gonna work on bridging that gap. But the problem, the biggest problem with that is that building down there, the pools and all that, it's just expensive. But I still don't like to see that gap. I think we can boost revenues by being, we've got some ideas about being a little more friendly on how we do our billing and how we accept, you know, we're gonna get real, make it easier for people to spend money with us. You know, we're gonna really, you know, there's a lot of areas we can work on, even, you know, that $2 million, to me, as an operator, that's not good enough. You know, we gotta shoot for the moon. And I think shooting for the moon on revenues and also watching our expenses, we're gonna create a good story at the end.
So yeah, I think between the fact of being closed, 2020 is gonna come in less. Our assumption was to continue in phase 2 for 2021, which doesn't involve being closed for a good chunk.
Okay. I guess when I look at those things, I still say, I mean, in my mind, those are areas that are, I would consider at risk. You could be high, it could be low. A lot of the other numbers are pretty reliable. It's just something that I would personally mentally note, that's all. Couple other questions. Can you go back to, I'm looking at operating expenses and compensation. I don't know, I wrote down a bunch of compensation numbers and I was doing it quickly, so Lord knows if I was actually right or not. Okay, there we go, yeah. This is probably far more of a comment than a question. Compensation is a hot button here at the village, you probably know that. All I'm noting is it's going up by, as much as 10%, 8 or 9%, something like that?
You are
From
200
2020 forecast to 2021 budget. Going up by 1.6 million, which is close to 10%. It's just a hot button. You know it, I know it. Comment.
We have a good chunk that's had to go up because of minimum wage increase, and
Right.
said that's roughly a little over 400,000.
Mhm.
We did try to, if you notice, the budget difference between compensation from last year to this year is only 219,000.
Mhm.
So that's taking into account all of the minimum wage increases through level 5 that will get a small percentage, because we're trying to kind of morph the whole bottom group.
How much did you say that minimum wage was worth, 400,000?
Roughly 400,000. What it is, it's not just the $11. What it is since we moved to 11, anybody making 1050 or to the gap, I believe there's a 11 something, you have to compensate up. So it's kind of a rolling, we did it stage 5 levels, we did a rolling up to make it fair across the board. And also what that compensation involves is, you know, and I know in particular, there were several departments that got pulled a lot of staffing away. Golf was in particular. We added a few positions back that got approved, rightfully so. Golf operations on the golf course side has been struggling all year with lack of staff. So we had to get that back up. So if you look at a $400,000 increase, which is all your lower level tier, with the 219 plus adding some positions, I think we're in a pretty good spot.
Is that 400,000 just the minimum wage impact by itself? Or is that also bringing departments up to, quote, a higher level of crewing because they've been
The
shorthanded?
400,000 is just the effect of the
Just the effect of
$11, yeah.
Okay.
It's roughly right around 400,000. The other thing, we didn't go across the board with any raises or anything this year because of COVID and everything. Didn't think it was responsible. We're gonna look at this year's as, like I said, it's a proving year. Let's get to work. Let's get things done. But you know, when you do see that, when I look at this and see the compensation, you know, we need to boost revenues, and that's one of the main goals this year is boost revenues. Wherever we can, however we can do it, we're gonna keep boosting revenues to offset the number.
I would also like to make note that with our compensation, all of our part-time positions, we try to get more of a realistic figure going in for our budget. So for example, if you have a golf shop attendant that truly only works 1 day a week, we didn't budget all of our part-time at a full part-time capacity. We looked at how many hours they've worked in 2020, averaged it out to the rest of the year, and added 25% in hopes that, like I said, this year we were closed 3 months. Hopefully next year we do a little bit better, so we've accounted for that as well.
May I ask, are there anything included in salaries or compensation that might be past wages due
Yes.
to, okay,
Correct.
that's a fairly large number
I know
itself.
where you're going with that.
Well, I asked it very diplomatically.
Well, we were gonna go to, and I'll jump right to it. We can jump right to that deal. We'll jump to the admin section.
Okay.
And that's a piece of chunk of the pie there too.
I have one other question. This is probably just more housekeeping than anything else. Last year, you announced that there was going to be an expense shift where numbers that were running through operating would be then moved down to capital. And I assume that was implemented this year?
This is what we were proposing for right now. Is that what,
What's the question? I missed the
can
question.
you restate? Maybe I misunderstood.
Yeah, my understanding was there are certain items that historically have been treated as operating expenses. So I'm thinking stuff like asphalt. And it could be treated as capital expenses. So in 2019, we did what we always did, and in 2020, we're gonna move up to $2 million out of operating expenses into capital expenses.
I believe they made that switch in 19.
They made that,
They did.
okay,
And so, to that point, that created an interesting dilemma for me, because I could see how that would get a little cloudy too. So what we're doing with this new account, and with the approved capital expenditure form, just because we have this over there, what some people can get tricky is start moving this stuff into capital and be kind of putting that capital as like a retainer. Well, I got 50,000 in capital. Well, really you don't. So we need to really earmark each piece instead of taking a lump sum out of the budget. Say, $75,000 out of a line item, we're gonna move that to capital because it's usually capital. Then we could get excess from that, but we could also get what I call sandbagging. We didn't want that. So,
I have a capitalization and depreciation policy that is prepared to submit to you guys for review. So within the fact that some of these items that were moved, and if we can go to a standard policy, anything that extends the life of an asset over a year and meets a certain threshold is what should be capitalized. There are items, so for example, HVAC units. I understand if we spend $70,000 through the entire year, but that's truly 20 different units on 20 different buildings that doesn't necessarily meet a threshold, those things are being put back into operation expense because that is truly what they are, as long as you guys are okay with the policy that I'm gonna propose. True capital items, according to GAAP and IRS regulations and so forth, and the standard guidelines, that's what's gonna be in capital.
what was the threshold, 5?
5 is what I'm proposing.
We propose $5,000. Anything above $5,000 that has a life is a capital project. Anything below would be operating.
well, I mean, at the end of the day, what you spend is what you spend. It doesn't matter to me whether it's in operating or capital. The issue is when I look at 2020 versus 2019, et cetera, am I looking at
19,
consistent?
19, they had moved everything to capital. I will tell you, for the 21 budget, I did move the HVAC stuff and some of the smaller, a new roof for a building that's only 3,000, I put it back into operational. As long as you guys approve the budget, that's where, and the policy, that's where it will stay.
I think you're right, Tom. It's kind of, you spend it wherever, but I think for tracking purposes and to make sure we're building our reserve projects, I think that's kind of why we wanted to put that in place, to make sure we're being responsible on the capital side.
Okay.
I want to tag on to what Tom said on the compensation line. That will be something the board is going to want in detail. I just did a couple quick numbers and I still see a $1 million hiccup there.
Well, you also have to, this could get deep if you want to go deep right now or later. You also have to, I've analyzed this too. You also have to understand our operation. It's not like you're run-of-the-mill little POA in Wisconsin or whatever. You've got a huge city here with professionals that you have to hire to run these certain departments. And when you're talking about that, we're shaving as much, and I think we've been pretty responsible of removing a lot of excess wages off the top. If you look down below, where's the sheet?
I wanna show you.
Show our average. Our average, show that average, 15, whatever. Our salary. Let me show you this sheet to kind of put this in perspective.
Oh, it's not on here.
But our average, Ken, maybe you can help.
1565 an hour going into 21.
Our total overall.
That's the average.
Our total average for wages is 1575. 65? I'm sorry, 65. So, apples to apples, when you got an overall wage of, an overall salary wage of 1575, we're really not that far off. To your point though, I think we've been really heavy top-wise, and we're trying to mesh that down to the bottom, and that's the plan going forward. We need to start taking care of some of our line level folks that we need to start building, we want to be the employer of choice, we want to take care of our people, and that's how you do it.
Couldn't agree with you more.
So I get where you're coming from, and I agree. it still needs to be massaged.
Yeah, the point I was making was, that's the one line that is
It's big.
is hot.
And please note
And
that
the board will want some specific details on it.
Please note that compensation line on the summary sheet includes all of our benefits.
Yeah.
That's all of
No,
our
I know.
insurance and payroll taxes and so forth. So if you look at this sheet, this is more in line with what our actual payroll is, what our benefit cost is to our total.
So you're looking at a little 4.7 million just benefits alone. But it's something I think ongoing as operations, we need to ongoing assess that and make sure that we're in the right market, we're fairly compensating across the board, and make sure we're not overcompensating, and make sure we don't have duplicate positions that are kind of doing the same thing. I think that's one thing we're really diving into right now, is understanding, do we got 3 managers over one thing? Believe it or not, we sometimes do find that. So we are trying to condense some things and make sure that
Okay.
we're responsible on that side.
Is there a
Also-
comparable, go ahead.
Here's your note that you wanted from admin.
Yes, that's what you're talking about right there, if you can read that. These expenses in here contain that there down at the bottom. So that's a big hit through at least July, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
This,
Well,
we
it
have,
is, yeah, it is
It
July.
could be a little more, right?
no, that's the
Oh,
max.
that's the max.
The max
Okay,
is
okay.
July, and so that, our compensation includes that other salary
Right,
through July.
correct. I'm aware of that.
So we can run.
I compensated for
That's
that
kind of,
here.
and I believe that was your question, correct now?
No, mine was gonna be, of the 1575 hourly average, that is just wages, I would assume. Is there a comparable, if that includes benefits?
That's, well, is that what?
I believe
That's
it's
just wages.
It's just wages.
Yeah.
Wages.
To me, it's a decent metric to possibly use for the future to maybe put out an hourly average for benefits, just for comparison year to year.
Yeah, and I think one thing
Possibly.
Kim's, how long have you been here?
6.5 weeks.
6.5 weeks. She's got a lot on her plate. One of the things we really want to get at is get a true market study of wages and where we fit in the picture. And that's going to give us a telltale sign, because, we want to make sure we're not overcompensating, but we also want to make sure we're not undercompensating.
Yes.
And I think that's on her bucket list to do. I think she's diving in among the other 6,000 things she's supposed to have done by yesterday.
Right.
So we'll dive right into admin here real quick, if that's okay with you guys. The administration lines basically are assessments, comes from the front page. You got your future debt line in there. You got your revenue, which the revenue is down a little, and that is because, Karina?
We've got some of our interest and some other items that are decreasing for this current year. Also, we didn't project outlandish amounts of sales in any category.
That was one of the big line items, is there was a pretty hefty amount of, I think, 20 or 30,000 in sales. We didn't project those out. Your compensation is a 1.7, which 2020 forecast is 1.735. 2019, it goes up a little bit from there. Operating expense 1.2 compared to 2020 budget of 1.3 compared to a 2019 actual 1.4. So we're trying to head in the right direction there. The total net admin is 2.7 compared to budget last year to 3.023 compared to 19 actual of 2.737. And you kind of see the employee count. Any questions on that one?
So I don't have to yell. Is there any kind of overhang from the NRPI, or whatever you want to call those guys, decision? If we are not actively pursuing collections, do we have any provision for bad debt that might be under consideration or something?
We're gonna have to address that. The only thing that has been added to this currently was roughly 400,000. I know you guys or the board has made some decisions on how to handle some of that, so that's gonna have to come into play depending on how that comes out.
I mean, no matter what happens, it's not a cash event. I assume it's just an accounting event that may look bad on,
It's gonna look bad on our financials.
right, but you're not losing money, we've already lost
Right, we
it.
never received the money.
Right, okay.
It's like that friend you can never get rid of.
I mean, but is it big?
It's still, the fact is, it still gets counted in your revenue. You do have a bad debt provision, which is everything from older than a year, which includes a good chunk of that. But the fact is, yes, you're gonna end up writing it off. It will not be as a receivable on your balance sheet. And instead, it is a debit for bad debt expense on your income statement.
Okay. Okay, very good, thank you.
All right.
And it's in this area, the compensation might be for past wages a little bit?
Yes.
My earlier question. Okay, just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
I think that was your earlier question, right?
Yes, it was.
It's in there. Down at the bottom, there's a little note. It'll go through
Yeah.
max of July, and then we'll be done with that. So that'll bring that down, pretty good amount.
Yeah, yeah.